Over the past few weeks, I have been watching as much TV coverage of Pope Leo as I can find. I have mostly been watching the coverage from EWTN, the Catholic channel. One day, they began to discuss that our last two popes were members of religious orders, Francis being a Jesuit and Leo an Augustinian. The commentator described religious life in a way that I had never considered. You may know that almost all, or if not all, professed religious people take 3 vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. These are called the evangelical councils. The priest who is commenting said that they take these vows not because those things they give up are bad, but because in place of those things, Jesus offers them true wealth, true love, and true freedom. This struck me, and I had to stop and think about it again. Professed religious take a vow of poverty because in embracing poverty, they find true wealth. They take a vow of chastity because doing so opens them more fully to true love. They take a vow of obedience because through obedience they can learn true freedom. This conversation struck me because it is our default to think of vows like this of causing people to be deprived. They are giving up major parts of life when they join religious communities, but that is not the way he presented it. He saw these vows not as a deprivation, but as primary ways that they open themselves to fully receiving God's grace. I've also heard from monks and nuns themselves, monks and nuns that I know, that of the 3, obedience is the hardest to live. None of us really wants to follow someone else's instructions any more than the Hebrews did when they wandered through the desert in Exodus. We all want to do our own things and go our own ways. This is what made that comment on EWTN that day stand out so much to me. Through obedience, we can learn true freedom. And this is the major theme of our readings today. Who should we obey? What should we obey? What should we do? And how does obeying make us free? Too often we separate freedom and obedience as opposites, but that is not what we find if we truly live out the Christian life. Our first reading is all about obedience. It comes from the book of Acts, chapter 15, and this section is known as the Council of Jerusalem. Many people consider it to be the first church council, to be followed by others like the Council of Nicaea, the Council of Trent, the Second Vatican Council, and so on. The question that this council has to answer is this: do non-Jewish converts to Christianity have to follow the Jewish rules? Jesus was a Jew. He followed the Jewish laws. The 12 apostles were Jews. They presumably followed the Jewish laws. But as Christianity spread, non-Jews wanted to be Christians, and they didn't know how to handle this. If you are following along in the Missalette, you may have noticed that we skipped a big section of Acts 15. We read today verses 1 and 2, which set up the problem, and then we jumped to verse 22, which laid out the solution to the problem. We skipped all of the discussion about the problem, but that section is very interesting. Paul is at the council, and he says that non-Jews should not have to follow the laws. James is also there, and James believes they should follow the laws. But Peter is also there. After Paul and James and others have shared their sides of the story, Peter stands up to speak. Peter says that the non-Jews do not have to follow the laws. What's truly amazing in this passage is that as soon as Peter speaks, all of the discussion stops. Peter is the Pope. Jesus gave him the keys to the kingdom and the power to bind things and loose things. When Peter makes a decision, that decision is final. And now the others there get the first chance in history to either obey or disobey a decision of the Pope. What makes this a wonderful story about the church is that everyone there obeys. Paul and James, who had been in clear disagreement, immediately go out and start proclaiming the decision that was confirmed by Peter. James sets aside his opinion and proclaims the truth of the church as decided by the first pope. Obedience does not always mean, okay, you've convinced me. More often, obedience is, I recognize that you have real authority over me, and I am going to do it your way because I trust you. This is the beauty of the church that we see on display in Acts 15. This is also a beautiful aspect of the church that we continue to deeply struggle with today. The issues within the church that divide us today are different, but they clearly still exist. Even though church teaching on many of these issues is clearly settled within our own pews, we can still debate things like whether or not people can use artificial contraception or not. We debate, can the death penalty be used? We debate who can and cannot get married. However, we want to solve these debates today. It is clear that we must turn to the authority of the church. And through our loving obedience to that authority, we can find the answers. This is the example set today for us in the Council of Jerusalem in the first reading. And then, as the first reading should, it sets us up perfectly for the gospel. In the very opening sentence of the gospel today, Jesus proclaims, "Whoever loves me will keep my word." Whoever loves Jesus will obey Jesus. Too often we believe that love and obedience are separate. We treat obedience as a negative word, seeing it as a restrictive word that someone is trying to impose on us instead of respecting our freedoms. We even tried to distinguish our popes today on this topic. In recent weeks, I have heard people describe Pope Francis as the Pope of love and his predecessor, Pope Benedict, as the Pope of dogma, and then speculate about which kind of Pope Leo will be, as if he could only be one or the other. The reality is that all of our popes can and should be both leaders of love and leaders of dogma. To illustrate, Pope Benedict once said, "Each of us is the result of a thought of God. Each of us is willed. Each of us is loved." And Pope Francis once said, "The church has a very clear understanding of marriage, an exclusive, stable, and indissoluble union between a man and a woman, naturally open to procreation. Only this union can be called marriage." Teaching the truth is an essential part of love. It was true for Peter in Jerusalem. It was true for Benedict and Francis and now Leo. Teaching the truth is an essential part of love for me as a father when I try to force my children to eat vegetables instead of eating candy. Or my role as a principal here at this school when I tell my students that doing your work actually does make you smarter. And it is an essential part of the life and the work and the teaching of Jesus. Jesus gave love, but Jesus also asked for obedience. And on top of that, Jesus himself was the most obedient person who ever walked the earth. "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as you will." Yet he was also the most free. Obedience to the Father's will is freeing, not restrictive. If we force our children to eat vegetables, drink water, and do their homework now, we are freeing them to have full and free lives when they are older and more mature. Men and women in religious life welcome their vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience because they free them from the falsity of the world around us. Jesus, through his church, offers us guidance that will free us from all of the ills and evils of this world. And why can he do this? Because he rose from the dead. He, the one man who has power over even life and death, can claim power over everything, even the parts of our lives where we would rather follow our own desires. Just as we have popes who are popes of both love and dogma, we have a God in Jesus who is both a Savior through love and a Savior through dogma. The same Jesus who says at the beginning of today's gospel, "Whoever loves me will keep my word," says at the end, "Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give it to you. Do not let your hearts be troubled or afraid." Only in Jesus do we find peace, but it is not the same peace that the world pretends to offer us. The world around us proclaims peace as leave others alone. That is something passive. Jesus' peace is to drive out those things in our world that turn us away from him. It is an active peace. And once we have removed all of the beams from our own eyes, we may find the peace and the freedom necessary to help our neighbors and our families and our children remove the specks from their own eyes. May the peace and love and freedom and obedience of the risen Jesus Christ be with you all.